So the last match of international rugby is taking place this weekend. The Springboks head into the Principality Stadium to take on the Welsh. Now these two sides look very different from what we saw throughout the November internationals earlier on. They've had to make big changes, but still two pretty decent looking sides for this contest. And in this preview, we'll be looking through at the lineups, the key head-to-heads, and then also a prediction at the end for who I think will win this matchup. But we will be starting with the Springboks. Their lineup looking very different from what we did see last week up against the Irish. Many of the Japanese-based players, as well as a few in the URC, have returned to their clubs, but still Rassi has put together a pretty formidable looking 23-man side, and it all starts in the front row. The three Bulls representatives, Gerhard Stennekamp, Johan Robelaar and Wilco Louw, slots in as the three. So these men have been making their way more off the bench for the South Africans, but in this case they get chucked into the deep end, the starting lineup. But the thing is, they've been winning scrum penalties off the bench. They'll be winning scrum penalties in the starting lineup. And just like that game last week up against the Irish, I do feel that is somewhere that the Springboks will target. Just set pieces in general, but predominantly that scrum is where we're going to see some penalties awarded. In the locking duo, it is Jean Klein as the number 4 with Ruan Nokia slotting in at 5. So Ruan Nokia, he has been a workhorse for the South African team all throughout 2025. He has been playing extremely well. Those line-out steals as well as just general play, he's going to be a handful. But I am wondering at what point does he reach his breaking point in terms of the amount of time that he spent out there on the field. Of course, he's going to be joining back up with the Bulls in the URC in the very near future. So hopefully he does get a couple weeks off before jumping straight back into it. But he has been an outstanding member of the Springbok squad for this year. In the loose forward trio, it is the captain, Siya Kolisi, as the number 6. Franco Mostert returning to 7 for this matchup. And then Jasper Wiese, the big physical brute, he will be slotting in as the number 8. Morne van den Berg takes on the 9 jersey. Now, Cobus Reinach here has reached his milestone 50th test, so I did think they'd chuck him in the starting lineup for this match rather than off the bench. But I do think because of his versatility, with the fact that he can play 9 as well as theoretically out on the wings, that is why we do see Reinach make his way off the bench rather than starting. And alongside Morne van den Berg in the starting lineup, it is Sasha Feinberg, Ngume Zulu. This is a dangerous duo. Morne van den Berg, he hasn't had a huge amount of minutes, but the time that he spent out there on the park, he's actually had a pretty solid year for the Springboks. He doesn't often go games without looking like scoring a try, and I do think in this contest up against the Welsh, he will certainly be scoring at least the one, and Sasha, he's probably in the same boat. If he isn't scoring in this game, he will at least be setting up someone else. And the Springboks backline in the centres, it is Andre Esterhuizen as the number 12 with Damien de Allende slotting in at 13. A bit of an unfamiliar spot for de Allende, but of course he will still play it extremely well. These two just battering rams in the midfield. It is going to be a physical, power-based tactic, I would think, for the Springboks with those two centres. Kanan Moody out on the left wing, Ethan Hooker out on the right, and then Damien Valimza, he will slot in as that number 15 to close out the Springboks starting side. Now off the bench, it is a 7-1 split. Reinach the lone back, but still some very effective players off the bench for the Boks, whether that's Kwaka Smith, Eben Etzebeth, or also the experienced head of Bongi Umbanambi does make a Springbok return after a little bit of time away from the field. But looking through at this Welsh team, now I'll be honest, when it was said that the Welsh were going to be losing at least 10 players to the Premiership, I did think that the side would actually look a little bit weaker than it does. It's actually a decent looking young Welsh team for this contest, which is great news. But in the front row, it will be Gareth Thomas, Dewey Lake as once again the captain, and Kieran Azarati slots in at 3, so not massively different from what we did see for the Welsh up against the All Blacks in just last week's game. Ben Carter and Rhys Davis, they will be slotting in as the locking duo. That's probably where they've taken the biggest hit for the Welsh. No Duff Jenkins in this game, no Adam Beard either. And in a game up against the Springboks, who, like I said, will be concentrated on that set piece, you feel like those couple big switches could definitely hurt the Welsh in this contest. In the loose forward trio will be Tame Plumtree as the number 6, Alex Mann number 7, and then Aaron Wainwright at number 8. He was supposed to be playing up against the All Blacks, but due to a late change, it meant that he was absent from that contest, but he returns now at number 8. And it is a decent loose forward trio. Some were a little bit surprised not to see Harry Deeves get another opportunity, but also some concerned about Tame Plumtree's discipline, and that discipline has to be the best that it can be in a match up against the Boks. We saw Ireland give away almost 20 penalties throughout that 80 minutes. So the Welsh, they cannot fall down that same track, because if they do, it could end up being a very long day at the office. In the back line, Kieran Hardy comes in at number 9. No Thomas Williams for this game, which is a bit of a shame, as I do feel like Williams has been playing some phenomenal rugby throughout 2025, but he will be partnering alongside Dan Edwards in that 9 and 10 combo. Rio Dyer out on the left wing. Joe Hawkins and Joe Roberts, they will make up the midfield, with Alice Mee out on the right and Blair Murray and number 15. I am very glad to see Blair Murray still getting another chance in this lineup. He was actually pretty strong up against New Zealand, and he is the lone man of the back three who keeps their spot. No Lewis Rees-Zammit for this contest, and also no Tom Rogers coming off a hat-trick. He is nowhere to be seen across this Welsh. 23 off the bench. Couple familiar faces from last week off the bench. Also a debut here for Danny Southworth in that number 17 jersey. It's going up against Azanati Klabakanye, so that is a pretty difficult man to make your debut up against. But if he does perform well, that certainly bodes well for him in the future for this Welsh team. But those are the starting lineups and some of the reserves for these two sides. Looking through now at the key head-to-heads, there are plenty of them throughout this matchup, but the first one I'm going with is Ethan Hooker and Rio Dyer. Two young players out on the wing. Hooker has been playing more on the left wing throughout the season. Also got himself a chance in the centres only a couple games ago, but he's out on the right wing for this contest, which does mean he goes head-to-head with Rio Dyer. I would call him one of the more dangerous members of this Welsh backline. He's got plenty of pace, does normally do pretty well for the Dragons throughout the URCs. Ethan Hooker, he was nominated for Breakthrough Player of the Year. Now, eventually Fabian Holland managed to get himself the victory, but Ethan Hooker definitely deserving of that nomination. This is just going to be a great head-to-head of two younger players looking to cement themselves in their respective sides. We see Josh Adams still absent from that suspension. No Tom Rogers for this game for the Welsh. So Rio Dyer, he is starting to go a little bit further down that pecking order of Welsh wingers. So a big game here up against the world champions to put him right at the top of the list for that contention. But next head-to-head, I'm very curious about this one. It is Aaron Wainwright versus Jasper Wiese. Now, Wiese has been bringing that physicality all throughout this season. He is always on the verge of getting himself sent off the field, but that is just because he goes at 150%. Aaron Wainwright, he has at times been the most experienced player across this Welsh 23 throughout the last couple of years. And he only recently brought up those 50 caps, so it just tells you how inexperienced this Welsh team is at the moment. But a player like Aaron Wainwright, he has to use every bit of his experience out there on the field. The Principality Stadium, we have learned, even if they are down in the points department, Wales, the crowd will still well and truly get behind them. They are a side that play with passion, and Wainwright here just needs to really feed into all of that and try and have a man-of-the-match performance for the Welsh. In this game, in the last head-to-head, I am going Damian Willemse and also Blair Murray. Like I said, I'm very glad to see Blair Murray in this Welsh side. Damian Willemse, he's been outstanding throughout the year as well. And it just seems like the type of head-to-head that if these two sides were theoretically on the same level, which they are not at the moment, of course, South Africa coming in as huge favourites for this match, but if they were, the battle of the fullbacks can normally sway it a little bit in a side's direction. Now, I don't think anyone's predicting Wales to get very close in this matchup, but Damian Willemse, normally known as an extremely strong attacking player, but his defence throughout the November internationals, I think, has been maybe even the more impressive part of his game. Blair Murray, there were talks that he wouldn't do well up against the All Blacks because of his size. He went out there, he had a very strong game in that number 15 jersey. Yes, New Zealand scored a lot of points, but let's be honest, they were always going to in that matchup. But Murray still had some very good moments throughout the match up against the ABs. But moving on now to the prediction in this contest. This is one of those ones that, depending on how harsh you want to be up against the Welsh, depends on what kind of scoreline you're looking at here. I'll be honest, this Welsh team, like I said, it doesn't look as bad as people were trying to say that it would heading into this game. Same can be said about the Springboks. There was a lot of concern about who was going to take to the field, yet it does just look like an experimental Rassie normal lineup that he would throw out there up against anyone in the world of rugby. So it is still a match between two strong sides, but I do think from watching throughout 2025, of course, one of these two sides has been quite a bit stronger. So I'm going to go with a Boks win. I'm going to say a disclaimer. I really hope I am wrong with the scoreline. I'm going 64-12 in favour of the Springboks. That seems very harsh. The last few times that these two sides have played, they've been separated by around that 30-point margin. But I just feel like if the Springboks team can fire from the get-go in this contest, they could really do some damage at the Principality Stadium. Now, I hope that I'm wrong. Like I said, if the Springboks were kept to less than 50 in this matchup, it would actually, for me, be a little win for the Welsh. Of course, it wouldn't be a win result-based, but just to be able to limit the amount of points that the Springboks score in this contest, I think would be huge for Wales. But yeah, I'm going 64-12. Hoping to be wrong, but we'll wait and see what happens at the Principality. But nonetheless, I do thank you all very much for tuning in. Of course, do let me know your score predictions in the comments down below. This game kicking off at 4:10 a.m. New Zealand time, which is 5:10 p.m. for you guys in South Africa on Saturday. We are going to be doing the live commentary on the channel, so of course be sure to check that out as well. But thank you all very much for watching. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next one.